Bom dia, para quem ainda não viu hoje. Eu vou conduzir aqui a próxima conversa com um dos nossos convidados especiais, neste caso o Jim Bagley. O Jim, que é um dos grandes programadores da indústria de videojogos, também ligado a algumas componentes da eletrónica no seu desenvolvimento, naquilo que tem feito também numa ligação entre eletrónica e videojogos. Tem sido também uma pessoa que não só esteve envolvido na programação de algumas das maiores referências de videojogos dos anos 80, inclusive um deles até está no o top 10 de sempre dos jogos de Spectrum. Também está envolvido naquilo que é a atualidade. Portanto, o Spectrum, na realidade, para muitos, há quem diga que terminou a sua atividade em 93, quando a sua distribuição comercial, de certa forma, começou a terminar e passar para outras plataformas. Na realidade, o Spectrum está bem vivo, com novos projetos, e nomeadamente um muito relevante, onde o Jim faz parte da equipa que desenvolve esse projeto, que é o Spectrum Next. Portanto, o Jim é uma das principais referências deste projeto. Vai estar aqui connosco também a partilhar, certamente, da informação à volta do próprio projeto, que está neste momento numa fase extremamente relevante. Mais uma vez, como ontem vos disse, não é apenas aqui um tema do museu, meu, do André e dos outros intervenientes que têm colaborado muito próximo deste evento, é também um momento da comunidade. Há aqui questões que são de facto vindas da comunidade e nós vamos também, de certa forma, conduzir a conversa à volta disso. Sem mais delongas, vou passar então aqui para inglês, esperando que, entretanto, o Jim possa se juntar a nós. Hello, Jim. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? All good?
I'm good, thanks.
Very good. Jim, thank you very much. I just gave to the audience a quick introduction about yourself. Thank you so much for participating with us. This is not properly an interview. It's more like a dialogue. So I'll try to keep kind of a chronological perspective of the things you've been doing in terms of our dialogue. So feel free to bring on whatever comes up to your mind that might be relevant. I don't stick to the questions a lot of time. So let's go and start our conversation. So, Jim, you've been one of the biggest references in software development and video game industry along the 80s until today. Involved also, I already said that to the audience, that you've been also involved in one of the biggest projects and one of the most successful projects in the Kickstarter, the Spectrum Next.
The Spectrum Next,
But starting from the beginning, here you go. So that's the first one. There's the second one coming in the near future, but I'll come back to that later. But looking back to Jim, the famous programmer from the 80s, how did it start, Jim? How did he start learning and evolving into the programming?
Right. Basically, when I was in high school, they had a computer room which consisted of one BBC microcomputer, which everyone used to play all the games on, like Defender and Pac-Man and Frogger and stuff like that. So because there was only one of them, there was a big queue. But they also had 6 Sharp MZ80Ks, which is like a whole computer and a monitor and a tape deck in one unit. And they had the basic programming manual for it as well. And because no one was using them, they were all waiting for it to go on the BBC. I thought, well, there's computers here. Why can't I try and make a game on the computer? So I started typing the programs in out of the book. And then I started trying to... hold on a second.
You have a special guest.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Dog usually comes and sits with me like when I'm working, so... And she wanted to go out. So, yeah, they had the 6 Sharp MZ80Ks. And what we'd do was... I started typing the stuff in out of the manual and realizing what each bits of the instructions were doing. So then I started changing them and making my own up, and then that started getting me into programming. And then the Specky came along, and I started. Well, I actually got a ZX81, even though I wanted a Specky at the time, and so I started making games on that in BASIC, and it just sort of grew from there. The passion for making games so that I could play them quicker than waiting in queues, or like we used to live, say about 20 minutes from an arcade, a seaside resort which had arcades, and so I used to go and play arcade games there in the summer holidays. Like say when I was making games in BASIC, I would try to make like clones, basic clones of the arcade games, so I didn't have to spend so much money in the arcades.
Oh, that's really good, really great stuff. So, but I know that at some point you were already very good programming BASIC, right? But you felt like it a bit limited, and you start evolving into machine code, right? And did kind of change a lot of things.
What happened was I was making more and more like intricate games, and I was realizing that BASIC, although it was great for learning, it was limited by speed and the amount of stuff that you could do or you could get moving around on screen. And there was loads of retro computer mags, and then there was one specific typing program. Well, there was loads of hex typing programs for machine code, but they were quite long and a few pages long, some of them. But there was one point where there was only about a couple of lines of a couple of lines of decimals. It wasn't a hex one. Byte values that you'd type in, and it'd poke them into RAM, and then it'd run it, and it'd make a white noise generator. Well, it'd make a white noise like a sound, and that's all it was. And that was enough for me to be able to use the manual at the back of the Spectrum manual, the instructions for the mnemonics and what each byte, what each number was and what instruction it was. And then I reverse engineered what all the numbers were in the typing program, wrote out what it was in assembly, and then worked out what each bit was doing. And because I had enough grasp of logic and the basic side of programming, when it comes to doing the machine code side, it sort of made sense. And then that was it. I was hooked. I started doing, getting something to clear the screen, and then I got something to print a character on the screen, and then it went from my games in BASIC would have a bit of machine code routines into like draw a whole map of characters on the screen, which in BASIC would take a long time, whereas in machine code it was just instant. It was great, and it just that like instant feedback, and it was sort of kind of euphoric, and it sort of fed my thirst for learning more and doing more, and just kept on iterating and adding to it, and then to the point where my games started to end up being completely machine code.
Oh, that's phenomenal. So looking back, and as a young guy that was starting development, and you starting to master in such a way that you outperform your professor, right? I remember one of your interviews, you said that. And how it was to switch between a young programmer to more like in a professional way, where you did start programming for famous publisher. Actually, I think not sure if it was your first game, but for Spectrum it was Throne of Fire.
Throne of Fire, yeah. Mike Singleton's one of his designs.
How it was for such a reference, right? So you're talking about Mike Singleton, and for you starting one new project and first game, let's go for Mike Singleton. How it was for you? So you kind of felt the pressure?
Yeah, there was a lot of pressure there because Mike Singleton was like a huge name in the games industry then. even in its early state. He's a lovely bloke, and I remember once, like he came into the office and he was working on Throne of Fire as well. He was working on Dark Scepter as well, and he came into the office and he said, "I've got it down to 200 bytes," and it was what he'd done is he'd made a sample for the sword fighting in Dark Scepter, and he'd compressed it down to 200 bytes. What he'd done is he'd gone into the garden with 2 spoons, clanged them both together, and then sampled it, and then compressed it down. And I thought it was funny that it's like just using spoons and to make the sword fight sounds. And he was like pleased with how he'd done it, and it was clever, it was good. And that was my first insight into how things look different to what they are in reality. In the game, it's sword fights, but in reality, it's just spoons clanging together.
Very good. So, and looking into what you have done from Throne of Fire, so at some point, you start moving, developing to other publishers. For instance, Ocean Software. When I look for your portfolio, that what you have built for ZX Spectrum, and I see some of the biggest hits. So we look into Guts, we look into Cabal, one of the biggest arcade conversions at the time, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Midnight Resistance, so it's in my top 10 of all time. So it's a really masterpiece in terms of coding, right?
10, yeah. Thank you very much.
Looking into it, so you were already good programming for with assembly. How it was for you to make possible for Midnight Resistance to fit in a 48K?
Yeah, that was a nightmare. When that first came into the office, they said, right, you got 3 months to turn that into a game for the Specky. So, first of all, it's huge. The amount of graphics in it is like monumental. And not only that, but to fit it into 48K, although it was multi-load, but just to fit a whole level into 48K was a nightmare. I think by the end of the game, I was down to like 3 bytes spare. That was it. And that was constantly, every time I had to add more, I'd be taking bits out. But yeah, I managed to get it in, which I was very pleased with. And I even made sure I got all the cutscenes in, because I wanted it to be as close as possible. The only thing I couldn't get was 2-player, but everything else I got in. I got the cutscenes, I got the tank at the beginning, I got all the enemies, and I was really made up with it.
Oh my God! So really, truly appreciate, because they just kept me busy at the time. Was quite surprising in the early 90s to get such a game. So I was really pleased with that.
Yeah, thank you very much
for your work at the time. Regarding Ocean, when you look into their portfolio, so a very extensive portfolio that Ocean had at the time, a lot of the games were based on arcade conversion of movie licensing, right? If you look into the games that you've been involved, we see those kind of scenarios. Anyhow, Ocean, despite the fact they had a team of developers in-house, you just came out developing games for them, but through Special Effects Software, which is an independent publisher company at the time with your team. Can you tell us a little bit about how it was to be not working directly through Ocean, but still working in an independent company? So you felt like you were not constrained by the biggest, companies like Ocean, and you would be more free to develop your own thing, or there's something underneath?
No, it wasn't that. It was, I lived about a good hour's drive away from Ocean, and I couldn't even drive at the time, so it would have to be a train to Manchester every day. So it was like I didn't want to do that, so I ended up like working for a company in Liverpool.
Oh, okay. So sometimes there's an easier explanation for that.
Luckily for me, it was special effects was made up of Paul Finnegan, which was the boss, and Joffa Smith, which was the co-founder. I guess you all know Joffa Smith if you're Specky fans. Jonathan Smith made so many classics back in the day. Pud Pud, Green Beret, you name it. He's done it. And they were ex-Ocean because they lived in Liverpool. I think they didn't like the commute, so they started like special effects in Liverpool.
Oh, very good. So, and for you, based on your portfolio regarding the games you developed at the time, what are your favorites? So, there's Cabal for sure. For many people, there's a consensus that Cabal was a masterpiece in terms of the graphics.
Yeah, Cabal. Everyone loved Cabal. My most favorite games that I've worked on are Cabal and Midnight Resistance because they were the games that when they came in, our first thought is, how are we going to fit this into a Specky? And then it was just a sheer dedication of, it was like when we first got it, it comes in like a metal briefcase with a PCB inside and a SCART cable to connect it into a TV. And it's got joysticks in the box on the case. So we'd have to then play the game, see how it works, play the game all of the way through from start to finish, and then get all the levels. We'd have to use a video recorder and record me playing the games because I was the best game player in the office at the time as well. And it'd record me playing the arcade game all the way to the end, just so that we'd had a reference that we could fast forward to or go back and to make sure that we got everything right and the way the levels are laid out. And we'd have to watch the way the baddies moved, and because we had no source code, we had no way of getting the data off the ROMs. We had no graphics. Everything was just on the cab, played on the telly, and that was it. If you didn't see it, it didn't go in. But that's why we had to play thoroughly, play the whole game, watch the way the things interact with you, like the planes flying back and forth on one of the levels at the top of the trees, the way the ship goes back and forth. We have to basically watch everything, how they interact with you, how you interact with them, just to then have to copy it and get it all working on the Specky, and figure out how many frames that we've got spare, well, how much room we've got for graphic frames for the animations for the enemies and stuff.
So always about mastering the code, right?
Yep.
So, but there's one curiosity regarding Cabal. So I heard about an Easter egg in Cabal. Can you share a little bit about it? Where the hell the character comes into the screen? I think he pieces it over the the Operation Thunderbolt, right?
Wolf. Yeah, yeah. Basically, we were having a laugh that Cabal had more baddies on screen than Operation Wolf. And then I was coming to the end of the project, and there's a little bit of memory left in it. Not much, because there was none of it was graphical additions to the game. They were already in there, like the character running, coming on the screen, walking left and right. And I'd been sent to Ablex in Birmingham, which is where they did the mastering of the tapes, duplicating all the tapes. So they sent me there to finish it off, and I had to get the game finished, and it was getting late, and it was going to be the next day that they'd start doing it. So, and when it finished, I thought, I've got like a couple of bytes free. What can I put in there as a little Easter egg surprise? So, because we were talking while we were finishing off and doing it, because I was there with Ivan Davies, who did the graphics for the Commodore 64 version. because, like I said earlier, like I didn't have a car, so he ended up having to drive me to Birmingham, and that's when we were talking about the amount of sprites on screen compared to Operation Wolf. Yeah, I decided to just put it in for a little surprise where at the start of the game, if you hold down certain keys, the guy would walk on, and then Operation Wolf would be just the words Operation Wolf would be printed on the screen, and then he would shoot water out of his gun, shall we say, and onto the Operation Wolf.
So the key combination was your last name, first letters, right?
Yeah.
Very good, very good. So, looking into the portfolio that we have seen that you also develop a few games for ZX81.
Yes.
Especially when you look into those that you've built for specific electronic devices and handheld devices.
Yeah.
What was the motivation for do so?
Basically, what I'd done is the year before I'd started doing I was talking to a guy called John Studley, and he's the UK stroke European champion at Pac-Man in 1983. He was the first person to get to the split screen. He didn't do it perfect then, but he was the first person to actually get to the split screen. I could play Pac-Man, but I could back in the day I could only get to like level 4 or 5 or 6 tops, because that's when they'd start speeding up and ganging up on you. And he decided to give me some tips on how to play Pac-Man. And then he's given me some things to search for on Google to find more information about the patterns that the ghosts run on it. And during my search on Google, I found the memory map for Pac-Man hardware. Now, as you know, but this is like way after the Specky days that I was working on the Specky. But when I was growing up, being by the seaside and the arcades, I loved arcades. It was arcades that got me wanting to make games. And then being able to port arcade games to the Specky, that was great. I loved it. But I always wanted to make an arcade game. And then, like I say, when I found the memory map for the Pac-Man hardware, I thought, I've got to do it. I've got to write an arcade game for Pac-Man hardware. So I was thinking, what game could I do? I thought, well, I've converted arcade games to Specky. And because Pac-Man hardware isn't overly complex, you can't do much. There's only the character sets in ROM, so you can't change the characters, and you've only got 256 of them, and the sprites, you can't change them. You've only got 6 on screen at once, and there's 64 images that you can use. So I had to think of something that was simple looking but fun to play, and it was a Specky game. So I did Manic Miner, which I then called Manic Miner Man, because it's Manic Miner inside Pac-Man, hence the title Manic Miner Man. And then, but after I finished that, I thought I really enjoyed making it. And what I decided to do is, because I'd done Specky games, well, I started writing games at home on the ZX81 first. And then, but I'd moved, when I got to the Specky, I was doing games in BASIC and then moved on to machine code. But I never went back to the ZX81 to do a machine code game. So after doing Manic Miner Man, I decided that I would go back to the ZX81 and do a machine code game, because I'd never done it back in the day. And I really enjoyed it. So I started doing a game called Jim Bagley's ZX81 Racing. And I made that. And then after I made that, I was chatting with a guy who owns the Retro Computer Museum in Leicester in the UK, called Andy Spencer. And I was talking to him about what I should do next for the ZX81. And I just said to him, do you reckon the ZX81, using the ZX band, of course, I said, do you reckon it would be able to play video? And he was like, no way, don't be silly. And then, so I thought, hang on a second, I'll give it a try, because I don't know if you know, with the ZX81, when you used to load a program off tape, it would go into fast mode, because it'd have to turn the interrupts off so that the timing wouldn't change when it's displaying the screen, because the Z80 in the ZX81 has to generate the actual display as well. So when you load a game off tape, it used to go into static, and then, because it wasn't generating a screen display. But when you use the ZXpand, when it loads off SD card, because it's reading the SD card with a PIC chip inside the ZXpand, and then sending it to the ZX81. The ZX81 doesn't need to turn the screen off, because it can carry on. But because the timing isn't as important as it was with loading off tape. Excuse me. And so because it didn't turn the screen off, I thought, well, if it can load data in, if it can load it in fast enough, it would be able to play video. So I did a quick test. I got a big binary file, just random data, and then loaded it off the SD card while into the screen RAM while the screen was still active. And then I phoned my mate back, Andy Spencer from RCM, and I showed, this was like about 5 minutes after him saying, no way, it can't be done. And then showed him the data updating on the screen that was loading in. And he said, oh my God, that's amazing. He added a few expletives as well, like, but as there's probably children present, I didn't want to say what he said. But yeah, and then I got the video was working then, and then we decided, what should we do? He said, well, what about Dragon's Lair? So I started then having to write a program that would take the image data from Dragon's Lair, which was full screen 720 by 576 true color 24-bit image of a video, and then convert it into 128 pixels by 96 pixels in black or white. So that in itself was a bit of a challenge, and making it so that it was visible and you could actually understand what you were seeing without it being too, because you've only got 128 by 96 pixels. It was hard to get like a lot of detail in there, considering you're going from color to black and white, from 16 million colors down to one or black or white, one or two.
Oh man, thank you so much for bringing us those insights, because it's really precious to understand our things going along the way. And
Yeah.
looking into you, and by mastering all that kind of projects already, and trying to come with new challenge over the board. So there's Spectrum Next, and you became part of a big project, very relevant project for the scene.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit how it did evolve from your side with the team of the Next, and the challenge that you guys had? For those that are following very closely, probably know a few of those, but probably know way more than us to share.
Yeah. Basically, can't remember the year now. I think when I was first introduced to it at a retro convention in, I think it was Manchester, or it might have been Blackpool. Anyway, Enrique was doing a talk. I was doing a talk at the show at the same time. Well, not at the same time, but I did my talk. Then after my talk, he was saying, that was a great talk, and you might be interested. Well, I might be interested in what his talk was going to be about, and he was showing off the designs for the Spectrum Next, and telling us about it and what it was, and basically being a clone with the Raspberry Pi as an accelerator. And then at the end of his talk, he was he said, "Has anyone got any questions?" And I put my hand up and said, "Where do I get a dev kit?" And he thankfully he gave me one straight away. He gave me his spare one. So I then took that home, and I was thinking, right, what should I do with it? Because like the bin dev kits apparently had been handed out to a few people, and a few of the developers, not at the show, but this was beforehand. And so I was thinking, people are going to be making games. So I thought, well, what if we use the Pi and then enhance what the basic can do, so that other people can make games? Because when I've been doing talks and stuff at shows, people have been saying to me over the years that I've loved the Specky. I grew up with the Specky when I was a kid, and I used to try and write games on it, but I couldn't get anywhere on it. So how do you get a sprite on the screen, and how do you get it moving around? In reality, it's actually quite hard, just because of the way the screen is laid out on the Spectrum. When you loading the screen up, the way it goes down in thirds, there's eight rows for the top third, and then 8 rows for the middle third, and 8 rows for the bottom third. And that's the way it is in memory, in order, if you go up 1 byte at a time. So to get a sprite moving around on the screen by pixels is very hard for a beginner. It takes a while. You can't just say, I'm going to teach myself machine code and get a sprite moving around on screen and get it done in a day. It's a long process to get efficient enough and fast enough to get something like that working. So I used the Raspberry Pi to listen to the Spectrum, because Victor had already just got it listening to what the Spectrum was reading and writing to RAM, and then it would take a copy. When it was writing to the screen RAM, it would take a copy of those bytes and then put it in its own screen RAM, so it could output through the Raspberry Pi's HDMI to the TV. So I decided to enhance it and his Spectrum display, but I added sprites so that you could have multicolored sprites bouncing around the screen in real time without having to. You can do it in basic, because I had it just write into an address in the higher up in RAM, and it would listen to those addresses and then move the sprites around accordingly. And when I did it, lots of people, some people were up in arms, like, "Oh, you can't do that. It's not a Specky anymore." And a lot of people saw the benefits of what it could do, and opening things up like that to basic, and it makes it a lot easier for when the kids of today, the next generation or whatever, or even people from back in the day who wanted to program but couldn't get anything moving around the screen, they could now get sprites moving around on the screen on a Specky, and they could then go back and relive what they wanted to do back then using these hardware sprites. It sort of rekindled, well, like it says on the box, rekindled your love for the Spectrum all over again. And I think when we did the Kickstarter for the Next, the first Kickstarter, one of the stretch goals was a bigger FPGA. Because we got the bigger FPGA, it meant that the stuff that I'd been doing on the Raspberry Pi could go internally and be part of the base Spectrum Next, so that everybody could do it. Not just the people who'd bought the the accelerated version of the Next, but the people who got the base model could still have access to all of these extra features and functions with the sprites. And then over the years, as Gary Lancaster was developing the Next Basic and Next ZX OS, he would get it so well. He was building up so it was like really powerful basic, and then I kept pestering him and said, any chance you could add the ability to access the hardware sprites inside basic? And he said, I don't know if I've got room, but I'll try. And then when he did it, it was a game changer for the Spectrum Next scene, because the fact that you could do it from basic in one instruction in basic and get a sprite on the screen or a sprite on the screen moving, that started a new wave of specky games coming out and new ideas, and it just really opened the market for more games, which is great for the people who have Spectrum Next.
So Spectrum Next Kickstarter 1, huge success. Kickstarter 2 was a blast. So all the stretch goals were being, achieved at the time. So anything you can share about what is your vision about what to expect in the next phase of Spectrum Next? So
next phase is I want to try and get it into the shops and get more units out there, so that the more units we have, the more people will be making games, because it's very easy for people to make games now on it, and there's a lot of tools coming out as well. Like there's assemblers, there's graphics programs, there's so much that actually on the machine, on the Next itself, so you can make games on while you just using the Spectrum Next. You don't need a PC, you don't need anything, just you can do it on the Spectrum Next itself. I also would like to possibly do a portable at some point. If we can get the backing for that, that would be cool.
Not with the Vega Plus team, right?
Yeah. Hopefully things will settle back down to normality again by that time, though, because at the moment the FPGAs are a nightmare to get hold of, as we found out with the second Kickstarter. Like we recently bought, because we had to change the FPGA that we've got in the Spectrum Next for the second Kickstarter, because of the chip shortage and everything. Xilinx, the company who make the FPGA, they decided to just drop, without word of warning or anything to anyone, or even an end of life term service for the actual FPGA. They just dropped it. No, they're not making any more. There's so many companies in UK and Europe that have paid up front for like so many thousands or hundreds of thousands of of FPGAs, and so because they dropped the FPGA, we had to get another one. But to get another one, we have to test it to make sure everything will run exactly the same as the first one. And so we had to buy them at the stupid price for just to make 12 test machines, so that we could test it to make sure everything works. And just the FPGA alone was $300 just for the piece to go on the test boards. So that's just because you can't get them for love of the money. The only way you can get it is paying like $300 for a couple of units. Obviously, we're not going to get the 6,000 units that we need at that price. So when we order the 6,000 units, we have to wait 65 weeks before they come back.
Very good.
And we can't do that until we've tested that the FPGAs will work as we want them to.
Okay, Jim. thank you so much for this talk and clarifying all the doubts that we had about your work and what you've been thinking of. I'll probably pass very quickly to the audience one or two questions. And I have also a special guest question that is coming before you end the call.
Okay.
But,
ominous and
it's a surprise for you.
Yeah, okay.
So, any questions from the audience?
Hello, Jim. Thank you for being here today with us.
My pleasure.
It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm one of the second kickback starters of the Next. Can you tell us, who are waiting so long, when a time when we will have the Next at our homes? Hopefully in June, July. Can you tell us something more?
Yeah, it'll be as soon as we can. Basically, what we're doing at the moment is we've got, as of yesterday, the 23rd, it's a great day for the Spectrum Next, and the Spectrum, obviously, 40 years ago. And then yesterday we got the 12 FPGA boards, well, test boards made up. So they're going to be getting sent back to the UK, back to us, so we can test them. Once we've tested them thoroughly, then we will give the go-ahead to order the FPGAs, get it all ready, get it made up, and get it shipped out as soon as possible. So it'll be around 65 weeks from then, unless we can find a way, which we are currently trying to pester Xilinx or Xilinx or Xilinx or however you pronounce it. We're trying to get them to give us a shorter date, because 65 weeks is a very long time. The problem is we are only a small company with a very small order of 6,000 units, so it's not really high up on their priority list. So, like, if a car manufacturer comes in and says, "Oh, I need 6 million of these," they'll obviously get like priority, which is why we have a lead time of 65 weeks. So hopefully it'll be sooner, but we don't know. It's not in our hands, unfortunately. If it was up to us, we'd sent them out soon as. But yeah, we have to wait for the parts to arrive before we can do that.
Thank you so much, Jim. Probably going to move for the next question, but this time it's a special guest coming in. I'll invite you on stage. Clive Towson, please join us.
Clive. Hey, there he is.
So Clive is here with us, and it's a kind of blending both talks. So I think Clive has a question for you related to the Next and some of the things he's been doing.
Hi, Jim.
Yeah.
Hi, do you have a release date for Saboteur on the Next?
Ooh, release date for Saboteur. So you still want me to do it, yeah?
Yep, definitely.
Okay, right. I will get on it. I'm just.
I know you're a busy man.
I'm a very incredibly busy man, but I have now recently dedicated all my time to the Next. So good things shall be happening.
Cool. I'll give you everything you need: all the graphics, maps, code, everything.
Okay, cool.
But not time. You have to find the time.
Yeah. Which version do you want me to do? Is it the first
all of
one?
them.
All of them.
I'll write Saboteur 0 before you finish Saboteur 1.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a challenge.
Okay, guys, thank you so much, and thank you, Jim, for being here with us. Let's give an hand to Jim for this talk.
Yeah, see you soon. Thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Sorry I couldn't be there live and in person, but it's
Sorry.
probably for the best as I have COVID, as you can probably tell from the coughing.
Oh man, sorry to hear that. Well, best of recovery for you. I hope that you can be
I'm
back.
really better. I'm getting there. I'm on the mend, so it's good.
Good to know. Good to know. So thank you, Jim, for being here with us with this big event for the ZX Spectrum. And in name of on the Load Museum, the Portuguese ZX Spectrum Museum, we give you a big thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jim.
Hope to come see
Bye-bye.
it one day.
Get well.